Welcome to the Rooted Lounge, where we break down the 3 core relationships that shape everything about your life as a mom: your relationship with yourself, your partner, and your kids. We're Monica and Michelle, therapists turned mom coaches, and we know firsthand that motherhood isn't just diapers and to-do lists. It's an identity shift that touches every part of who you are. This ain't your mama's motherhood. Here, we mix real mom talk, a little humor, and a lot of truth to help you feel more grounded, connected, and fully alive in your life as a mom. So grab your coffee, hide in the bathroom if you have to, and let's get into today's conversation. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Rooted Lounge. So today we wanted to talk about an important topic and one that comes up a lot. So we hear all the time about one of the biggest things that happens after having kids is the dynamic shifting between moms and their spouses, and particularly around communication and how hard it is to have effective conversations with their spouses. So that's what we're going to be talking about today: how to have hard conversations without blowing up.
Keyword, right? Without
Yes.
blowing up. Because especially I think throughout, regardless of how old your kids are, but especially at the beginning when, whether you're new parents or you just don't know how to necessarily navigate it, and your relationship really shifts, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked about that in previous episodes about how you go from a sense of partnership to almost feeling like roommates, and then where that communication kind of comes in throughout that shift, because you go from maybe talking more just about your relationship to then just talking about logistics, more of what's happening with your children, or just management of schedules and all of those things. So I think that is one thing that definitely shifts, and we want to make sure that's not all the conversations that you're having with one another. And kind of going off of that is, because everything shifts, our emotional safety shifts, and the way that we communicate our emotions shifts, because I think as moms, we might not even know where our emotions kind of lie. So there's a lot of moving parts. So I think today it's going to be a lot of more kind of deep rooted discussion about what that looks like, how it feels, and honestly probably why a lot of partners have a lot of difficulty within their relationship once they have kids.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think in my experience, I think the first, honestly, it's kind of a stretch, but the first 10 years after having kids are some of the hardest, particularly if the first few or handful of years you've just been coasting and just trying to keep your head above water. So once the dust actually settles, then the the truth of that shift in the dynamics and the miscommunication really comes to the surface. And there's no more kind of hiding it. Now it's in your face.
Yeah. And then sometimes it ends up being more difficult to repair. And I feel like the effort is there has to be almost more effort the longer it goes without being managed or identified or the awareness of it all.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think too that so getting a little off track, but I do want to say this, is that I think too a lot of times couples think when this happens, what I just mentioned, that it's the end.
Yes.
That, oh, well, we reached kind of our point and that's it. We don't work anymore. Nothing's working anymore. And the reality is of course there are some situations that there are other things happening that maybe it is the end.
That is the truth.
So I think one of the biggest things is that really the only issue that has happened is that there hasn't been an acknowledgement that this shift has happened, and then knowing how to readjust to it.
Yeah.
And again, a lot of people just interpret it as like, oh, everything has gone to hell and we just like clearly like we're not meant to be anymore or
Right.
whatever.
Right.
And that's not the case for a lot of couples. So
right. And it's about incorporating the other conversations that you maybe not used to have, but that are more deeply connected, that aren't talking about logistics, because you are going to talk about logistics. Like, that's not going to go away. Like managing the household, managing the schedule, who's going where, like all of those things are still going to be a part of the conversation, but it's about having other conversations that bring you closer together so that it's not so robotic. It's not so mechanical, which I think is important to note, that the logistic management is still going to be there. But even just like the safety and emotional piece of talking about that, because we can also blow up about logistic management too, right?
Sure.
So I think that the emotions and how we react to it is the same, whether we're talking about logistics or we're talking about like intimacy or deeper connection stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And something that comes to mind, it's interesting because I was just having a conversation with someone recently, and it wasn't specifically around communication with their spouse, but it's an interesting kind of parallel with what we're talking about today, because she was talking about how now that she's a mom and these different things are coming up in terms of like maybe parenting challenges or whatever, that she's noticing in herself that she's lacking effective communication skills or knowing how to model, certain behaviors for her children, or even how to effectively like just talk to them and kind of get through to them.
Right.
And how it's really kind of shining a light on how this was a real gap for her personally. And now as a parent, it's just like really noticeable.
Yeah, well, and especially because like that's all we're doing, like all we're doing is communicating. I mean, that's such a huge part of our life. And I know this episode particularly, we're talking about your like relationship with your partner for the most part, but I think any of you who are listening can also take a lot of this for any relationship that you have, because it isn't just about the communication with your partner, it's about the communication with your kids, with your family, with your friends. Because still a lot of those things can kind of come up, and so much changes once you do have kids. So kind of going to your point of like it being more of like, I don't really effectively communicate, period. Not just with my partner, not just with my kids.
Yeah. And I think going back to what I was saying before of how those first, few to several years after having kids, couples really struggle with their communication because they maybe didn't really have a strong foundation of their communication. And then it really, really comes through when they are trying to manage, co-parenting and childcare or discipline, or, how to raise their children and stuff like that. So that's a little bit of what we're going to be getting into today. So
and just something to add on to that too, of like how, and we'll talk more about it, but that the difference between like expressing through communication, but then just kind of dumping and in just communicating like more in an unhealthy way, right? Because communication is the overarching, but there is a way that we can express versus just kind of word vomiting or just kind of like flooding our emotions like onto somebody. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that, but I think it's important to note that like those are the things that end up happening, is we end up just like dumping. And again, not just with moms, but for this partners as well, so this definitely goes both ways. Like obviously we're going to be talking a lot about the mom perspective, but very, very relevant for the partner as well.
Yeah, definitely. So let's get into why these conversations are so darn hard. I mean, we already kind of mentioned some of those reasons, but I think one very obvious one and one very common one is, we talk a lot about moms being overwhelmed and overstimulated and stretched really thin. So when you're already so maxed out as a mom, it makes it that much harder for you to, regulate yourself and compose yourself enough to be able to have an effective conversation. So I think that that's definitely a big one.
Yeah. That you don't end up having it at all, right? Like you're just like, oh, I'm just gonna push this aside, and we're just not going to communicate about it.
Yeah.
Another one is kind of choosing the peace and harmony, even if you're not feeling that way, like you're like, okay, I don't want to bring it up because I don't want to ruffle feathers, or we have too much going on, like this isn't the right time to do it. So kind of a lot of those thoughts that kind of make you stop from bringing something up.
I just, things are good enough. Like we don't need to damper it with these hard conversations. Yeah.
Which I think also goes to like that emotional baggage of like, what has happened before? Their repeat behaviors. Do we want to bring up now these behaviors that have happened 6 times when I didn't bring it up the first time? And I mean, kind of cycles just end up happening. Because, you're like, oh, this happened 6 times. Like now it's really hard for me to bring it up because it's just happening over and over and over again. And how do I say it? How do we fix it? So.
Which that cycle ends up creating a much larger issue afterward, which is resentment.
Yeah.
And I refer to resentment as mold or a cancer in a relationship that, you can ignore it as much as you want, but it's there and it's slowly, deteriorating things. And
especially if your partner is engaging in something over and over and over and over again, and yourself included, right? Yeah. And even if you as a mom, like your partner's kind of seeing you do something over and over and over again, if he or she is not speaking up to you about it, and how are you? They're going to feel the same thing.
Yeah, and resentment will always come through, whether you recognize it or not.
Yep.
That you might think consciously, surface level wise, that like, oh, this doesn't bother me anymore. Like I let that go. But if you didn't actually resolve it, you have not let it go. No. It's there. It's deep in there, and it does start to boil up when something that similar that has happened in the past comes up again. That's coming right up, and that's when things end up blowing up, because you've been holding on to this for so long and you haven't ever really expressed the way that you actually feel about it. So that's when these blow-ups happen, and you're not in a place to actually say how you're feeling about things, like you're just like,
right. And because it's built so much to the part of explosion, you're not communicating it effectively either about what even your emotions are about that one specific thing. I think it also can kind of manifest in our own behaviors, and we've talked about this in past episodes, where we take on everything, where it's like, okay, I'll just do it, right? And even though you've done that and maybe you're fine with doing it, like at some point you're not going to be fine with doing it, that mental load and it isn't spread more equally, or with a conversation, even if it's not equal, it's the mental load or the load of doing is spread out a little bit, because then communicating about that, the resentment won't build as much, and then you'll also have more bandwidth emotionally, right? Like, I mean, communication is just hard in general, but the more that you communicate, the more bandwidth you're going to have, because if you keep that all inside of you, you're going to have no bandwidth, physically, mentally, emotionally. It's not going to be there, right? And so even if there isn't necessarily a fix in the moment, at least communicating and knowing that there's a problem or a discrepancy or a conflict or whatever, like, it's so important to do that, because then at least you can like release it quicker, more effectively.
I always like to think of that as like the visual of when you shake a soda bottle and it's just like fizzing like crazy, and that you can't just like open it because it's just gonna come shooting out. But if you slowly like open it a little bit and you hear the little kind of come out, and then you close it again, and then you let it settle and you keep doing that, that's exactly what this is. You allowing yourself to release a little bit and, you know, doing it in a way that you're not just spilling over. You're doing it in these like small little incremental baby steps. And that is just one super effective way.
Yeah. I want to give an example just because it's something that came to mind. And my husband and I have actually had this conversation multiple times, even honestly prior to kids, and it's just come up more. And now that like we have children, and it's super interesting because I also want to note that like you might not always find a solution as you're kind of like, you know, opening and closing that valve, right? Like you may not even, it's more probably awareness of communication within the dynamic more than anything at the beginning. And so the example that I want to give is, and I actually might have shared this in previous episodes, I can't really remember, but me and my husband are not cleaners. Like I don't know what it is. I grew up an only child and he had women clean for him like his whole life. So we always joke about how like, you know, we're disorganized in a lot of different ways, but like, especially now with kids, I mean, the toys are everywhere and like toys everywhere to me doesn't bother me, but toys everywhere for my husband bothers the crap out of him, right? Like so overstimulating, and I totally understand. And so for a really long time prior to even having kids, like we would butt heads, and we couldn't figure out like why it was so difficult for us to like figure out like who was going to sweep, who was going to do the dishes, who was going to do laundry. And again, like that's kind of come in since we've had our son, because obviously now there's more laundry, there's more dirt, there's more toys, there's more dishes, right? There's more of everything. And I already kind of said what our final kind of conclusion was, that we finally got to the place where like, why do we argue so much about these little things and we couldn't come up with a solution for the life of us. And really, it took us years to finally understand that, like, both of us kind of had all that stuff done for us, like when we were kids. And then even in adulthood and like college and stuff like that, like, what did we have to do? Pick up our dorm room? You know what I mean? Like, we didn't have a whole lot of responsibility. So we've hired a cleaner since then. So people clean our house. That was our solution. Hey, that's not everybody. That's not going to be everybody's like end all be all. But my point to it is that it really took us a long time to kind of come to this conclusion that might not necessarily be a behavior that either of us can break. We can work on it. May not necessarily be broken at any point in time. So how do we manage it? Because it still comes up. I mean, we've been together for almost 10 years. And especially right now with this new baby coming, like it is chaotic in our house and we still bring it up, you know? So I don't know. I want to give some normalcy to the fact that there will be situations where you can kind of communicate, open the valve, and you have a solution and then you close it and all is well. And then there's other times where it might take a little bit longer for you to kind of figure out where you guys are at and how to manage it, and just like getting on the same page, or at least understanding why the other person engages in the action that they do. So it's kind of a long-winded example, but
no, I think that that's an interesting, you know, way of thinking about the pressure valve thing. And I think too, the benefit of the pressure valve isn't just solely about coming to some type of resolution, but it's for yourself too.
For sure.
It's for you being able to not hold that all in, not let it build up, not let it fester, and not feel so heavy. You being able to express something allows you to release some of that overwhelming pressure that's within you. Which typically adds to, you know, getting really snappy and, you know.
Because we got really snappy. And even sometimes now we still do, but I think there's more of an acceptance. And again, that's like a pretty, you know, there's a deeper reasoning for why we function in that way. But
there's always a
there's always
reason.
that, like, I think that it's so important to be able to notice with yourself, because like I think that when those things happen, it's not that we're necessarily like enabling each other's behavior, but I think we've accepted it enough to be like, okay, this is where we're at, and we don't blow up, we don't argue about it, we're, you know, much less likely for it to fester, to turn into resentment, right? Because we've kind of gotten to this place of, okay, we kind of know how the other person functions, and we can kind of, again, come to a solution quicker, or, decide, okay, this isn't your thing, this is my thing. I'm going to be okay with you taking, 3 years to do something. I'm being a little dramatic, but I think there's just more acceptance in that particular scenario.
Yeah. So. Yeah, definitely. I think that these are a lot of the very real things that come up for couples. And totally. I think one other reason why conversations can be so hard too, we talk a lot about how common mom guilt is. And I think that the fear of being misunderstood or unseen or unheard from our spouses is a very real reason too why we might hold things in.
Especially if you have this idea that they're not going to necessarily be aligned with your belief or understanding or perspective, which again they don't need to be. That's not the point of communication. But I think that that's why so many people stop themselves from communicating, because of those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So, I think we really just want to drive this message home that hard conversations are choosing connection over suppression. And, as we always like to say, if you think about it, what's the alternative of not communicating things? Yeah. It's not going to do you any favors at all. No. So you suppressing it and holding things in is just going to make things worse over time. Yep. So really, communication is that, it serves so many purposes, but it is that vehicle that, leads you to deeper connection with your spouse, with your children, and so on and so forth. So,
and you learn so much about yourself too, in the way that you communicate by doing it versus suppressing it. When you're in it, you come to realize where your strengths and weaknesses are in it. But again, you have to do it in order to understand or know what those strengths and weaknesses are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, as we always talk about with that perspective of rooted motherhood, that, yes, here we're talking specifically about communication with your spouse, but it's also really important to acknowledge that how we communicate with others, whether we're talking specifically about, communication with your spouse or communication with your children, our children are always watching and observing and absorbing what we're doing and saying, and even how we're just kind of carrying ourselves. They can feel tension. They can feel energy in a room. I have heard so many different examples of whether it was directly from children or directly from the adults that were are you guys fighting? And it's no, I've had my own kids ask me are you and daddy fighting? And we're like, no, I don't. And there were times where I was like, no, we're actually being very playful together, and we're, having, or maybe we're talking about something that we're both really passionate about or something. And they interpret it as whether the elevated tone or, I'm not sure what they're picking up on, but they're oh, is something wrong?
Yeah.
So it's just,
I've even seen that happen with my 3-year-old. Not able to articulate those words, but there are definitely times where me and my husband are having communication. And again, whether it's about something we're super animated or excited about, or, something that is challenging and we're not upset with one another. Or even the little bickering, he is right there, hello, what are you doing? And then of course he wants the attention, right? So that's how he almost is intercepting our energy, because then he almost escalates with us, even if it's not escalation in a argumentative way, just again, tone or voice level, so yeah, for sure. It happens at any age.
Oh yeah, for sure. And for me, I'll give you a personal example. My oldest is very, very perceptive, and even when I think she's not listening, she is, and she's always trying to analyze kind of what's happening. And recently, my husband and I were having a conversation, and I'm a crier, and I cry with any emotion, happiness, sadness, frustration. You have it. And I was crying, and she kept like kind of walking through the room and kind of checking in, but then she would go back into a different room, and I'm very open and very comfortable with being emotional in front of my kids. I think that's really important. Yep. Again, depending on what the situation is. Sure. But I do think
showing the variety of emotions.
I think it's really important for them to be able to see that. And one, because it allows them to get curious about their own emotions, and it basically gives them permission to have their own emotions. But yeah, she kept kind of like checking in, and then once my husband and I finished talking, she came back and checked in with me, and she's like, "Mom, are you okay? Like, were you crying?" And I was like, "Yeah, I was crying." She's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm like, me, like I just get really like kind of emotional when I talk about things that are very meaningful to me." And it was just really sweet. One, that she kept checking in, but then I also, the point in me telling you this is that, kids are very, very observant. They pick up on what's going on, even if they can't make sense of what's going on. It's just to really say here that effective communication, period, but particularly with your spouse, the other adult in the home, that your children are able to gain effective strategies from seeing the two of you communicate with each other.
Yes, on all levels. Yeah. Now, yes, are there times where you're going to have like blow up fights with your partner? Yeah. Like, no, probably don't want to do that in front of your kids, right? But little bicker, little disagreements, like when you don't have the same opinions, when you're trying to navigate a conflict. I mean, so much of what happens with partners from a clinical perspective, but also just from my own personal like perspective as well, is that we growing up like never saw a resolution of conflict, right? And I drive this point home all the time with our clients, that having a little bit of a disagreement with your partner and communicating in front of your kids, take content away for a second, right? Is really, really beneficial, because when they see you mend that in front of them, they're going to know that it's possible. They're going to know that you effectively communicated. You hug, you kiss, you say, "I'm sorry," you come to a conclusion or an agreement. Maybe you guys are kind of coming together and really deciding on something that's going to help the both of you, right? Like they're seeing all of that, and it's hard because my parents never fought in front of me. Fought, I'm using that word, but like they really never had those they never really had those disagreements, and so I never saw how they mended their relationship ever. I really try to participate in that, because that is also going to be extremely helpful, because it's about the mending of the conflict, not having conflict at all.
Yes, I 100,000% agree with you. I think that repair is absolutely crucial. I don't think it's just like, oh, it's like good if you can do this. I think it's necessary. Like it is absolutely essential for that repair to happen, and not just like between you and your spouse so that your kids can see that. Yes, that's a benefit, but also to like, let's say you do blow up maybe at or around your kids, and then once you are able to compose yourself, it is very, very important to then go back to your kids and say, hey, earlier when mommy got really angry and, I was yelling and I was maybe using words that I don't like to use or whatever. I'm really sorry. I'm sure that was really scary. I felt kind of scared in that moment, or really this or that. And, I hope that, you can understand, what was going on, or even allow that to be an opportunity to ask your kids how that made them feel. That can be a really beautiful way to do that as well. But I think the repair is just absolutely crucial.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because it also helps them see that you're also able to take responsibility, that you're
it does so many things.
Oh my God, so many things. Yeah, like I feel like that could be an episode in and of itself.
Yeah.
Because it does. Like it's really
accountability, like you said, it's like emotion regulation, it's conflict resolution, it's communication skills, it's resilience skills. You're doing so much with just being able to repair. And I think it's too, and sorry, I kind of cut you off, but I think it's important too to mention that repair does not include sarcasm. It's not like, sorry, I made you mad, or anything like that. Like it is a genuine, intentional repair. I am taking ownership of what I did and how it may have affected you. That I think that's something really important to note, because there are people who are like, who do apologize and do it just to check off a box, or they still slide in that little tone of sarcasm, and it's like that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about like, check your tone, check your body language even, and make sure that if you can't come in an appropriate way, then maybe hold off and come back.
I actually think that's a great segue, like, into talking about like giving tangible, like, value or tangible, like, tools on how to show up, because I would say, if anything, that's the first thing to do in any communication / conflict resolution, in order to not blow up. Because I know for myself, I am a talker. Like, I have something in my head that I feel, if I don't say it within like 10 minutes, like I really struggle and have forever, because I want to talk about it, right? Like, I want to communicate. My husband, on the other hand, he needs to process before he says anything, right? And so, not for nothing, I need to also process before I say things. So, like, let me be clear on that like, when I have these flooded emotions, it is really, really, really important for me to go regulate myself beforehand, because don't get me wrong, there's still times where I show up and that's what I do, when I recognize I do it, and then I take a step back, right? It's not foolproof, but definitely don't talk when you are flooded like that, or you haven't taken the moment to regulate, to take that responsibility of, where did I go wrong? Where did this person go wrong? What am I feeling? What is this person feeling? Like, we really need to be able to do that in order to show up in a conversation effectively.
Yeah.
Because it really doesn't work any other way. I've been there. And I'm sure you have too, I'm sure you've shown up in that very dysregulated space, and it's not productive.
No.
And it'll cycle, it'll get into things you don't even want it to get into. I mean, that in and of itself
it can really escalate. Yeah.
It really can.
And even for me, where I pause and really think about what I want to say before I say it, because that's just me. I try to be very intentional about the words that come out of my mouth and how I say it. So I think for me, like, I do see the benefit of pausing, really think it through. And don't get me wrong, there have been times where I'm like, screw it. For sure. I'm just gonna say what I need to say, and it happens. I'm human.
Right, and then you can repair it after, for sure. Like, I think we're all human, and I think we all do that. Even if you have, like, my husband, he has such a great skill of just walking away, and from a person who never did that, it was really at first, like, I really needed to be okay with the fact that that was how he regulated his nervous system before talking to me, because I would want to just be like, let's go. Like, we need to talk about this right now.
Yeah.
And, through trial and error, we're like, okay, like that, I know that doesn't work. It clearly works really well for him, and it is not always productive to just say all the thoughts that you have in your brain at one time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think something important that I want to note, where you're saying like the walking away part, just like we were saying about the repair, that it's really important that you're not doing it in a sarcastic way, or that you're really touching, that you're really like in tune with how you are kind of presenting yourself in your body language. I think that there's also a distinction between like running away and intentionally walking away. Like there's a huge difference.
Absolutely.
Between like, because I know personally a lot of people who are something's hard, I'm gone. And like storming out and that sort of thing.
Yep. Because when you come back, nothing's resolved.
Exactly.
That's the difference, is that when you're walking away to process, to be able to come back more effectively, you have the intent behind walking away is very different.
Yes. Yes. Like the storm out, and then either I come back and I'm still pissy, or I just shoved it
into the rug, like under the rug, and it doesn't,
and it'll never come out again.
Yeah, never come out again. Right, until the resentment builds and everybody blows up again. Right, yeah. Right.
But I do, again,
that's a good point.
We're always talking about, intention, and I think that is a very important piece to remember, is that
differentiation between the two.
Like make sure that you are deliberately pausing, choosing to walk away for the purpose of, I need to go cool my jets, and I will come back once I have processed things and am able to express it in an effective way.
And you can also communicate that with your partner. Like that is also
I think that's really important.
Yeah, like you notice that you need to take a step back. You say, I can't do this right now. I need to go cool my jets. Once I cool my jets, we can have a conversation. I actually, I'm thinking about this. This was like a couple months ago, but my husband and I were having a discussion, and honestly, this was totally on me. And I noticed I was escalating, and then we were actually in the middle of the conversation, and my head was doing what a lot of times it happens when you're going through this cycle. You end up going somewhere that had nothing to do with why you started the conversation in the first place. And I noticed that was happening with me. And I said to myself, this is no longer productive. I can no longer keep going because it's just going to get worse. And so I looked at him and I said, I'm going into a space that I do not want to go into. And I was like, that is not related to this conversation. I was like, I need to walk away and you need to walk away. And we did. We didn't talk for like an hour. And then I was able to come back, and I was able to tell him really productively why I stopped the conversation.
Yeah.
And it was honestly, like, for me, it was actually the first time that I had actually done it in a really long time, like within the actual conversation, when things were kind of already escalating. But I had to communicate that with him. I couldn't just stop talking and walk away, because he would have been like, what are you doing?
Yeah, exactly.
Like I had to tell him.
And that could have made things even worse. Yeah.
Yes. So this is an example of being in the middle of the conflict, but that is absolutely important to say at the beginning, because your partner, if you've never said it before, maybe your partner doesn't know that you're the type of person that needs to take that step back. So they will perceive it as you not wanting to have the conversation, which my husband had to do that at the beginning.
They can interpret it
in any way.
Yeah,
absolutely.
A ton of different ways.
And for being the person who needs to talk about it, he had to tell me he was the type of person to walk away. So he told me that once. Okay, now I know he's not walking away because he doesn't want to talk to me, or he wants to storm off or never talk about it again. He needs it for his own processing. So I don't get upset with him when he walks away from me.
Right. Yeah. Another really important tool or like technique to use when you're trying to communicate effectively is we have a tendency to say like, well, you're making me mad or you're doing this. And that is just going to make the other person completely put their wall up. Okay. So it is always better to start a conversation with I, just in general. I'm sure, people have heard of like I feel statements. So just making sure that you lead the conversation with, I'm feeling this type of way.
Like when this happens, and then like expressing why that feeling is what it is from your own perspective, instead of focusing on their behavior. Yeah. And I mean, you can, like, it's not to say that you can't point out what you're upset about. For sure. But when you start with you, it comes off more attacking than it does from like your own personal internal space. Yeah. So we'll give you an actual like example, like, you make me so mad when you don't take out the trash. I mean, that doesn't land very nicely, but if I say like, I feel frustrated when you don't take out the trash, I would appreciate it if you would do that, because that would help me out a lot. Yeah. Totally different. It just comes off completely different. Yep. And you're still sending the same message, but in a way that is just so much more productive. Yes. So, I think I would love us to segue into some of the most common themes that are hardest for moms to talk about. And I did mention one earlier about feeling, misunderstood and feeling unseen. I think I mentioned how that's a reason why conversations can be so hard, but I also think the actual topic of feeling that way is really hard to communicate to someone else. So, Yep. And I also feel like we as moms, like we want the validation from our partners that they see what we are doing, and how do we kind of like elicit that with it not being authentic? You know what I mean? Like how can we communicate that we feel unsupported or we're not receiving those types of things, So whether it's affirmations or acts of service, like I kind of think about the 5 love languages that we often don't feel seen and supported in those ways, where, I mean, if my husband comes up to me and says like, I see that you're doing all of this and I really appreciate it. It changes everything, and vice versa, I mean, he shared with me that when I acknowledge all that he is doing, it really, just one statement, it switches so much, because you know that they see you. So I think that's probably number one. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. No, that's definitely a big one. Boundaries. I hear this one all the time in my clinical practice, because I'm a family therapist. So I hear so much about people's extended family dynamics and challenges, and especially with kids, and how challenging that actually is. Like, in all seriousness, how challenging that actually is to communicate with your spouse, particularly if it has to do with your in-laws or, the other way around. So that tends to be a really tough subject to bring up. And, I think it's important to be, really mindful about how you're talking about someone else's family. But that doesn't mean just because it could be a challenging conversation that you just don't talk about it, because again, it just leads to so many issues down the line. So agreed. Totally. I think that was a really good one to point out, especially about like extended family, like in-laws, right? Not necessarily about like, other people, or talking about your own family, you know what I mean? It's definitely talking about the alternative. another one that comes to mind is, I mean, really anything and everything with your kids. Like if you're not aligned on, I mean, anything, but like, you know, parenting or, medical, I those are the only two that just like popped into my brain, but like really
the bigger things, like academic, but then also like life skills in terms of their emotions, their behaviors, like manage how you want to manage their behaviors, like being on the same page with that stuff can be really challenging.
Especially when you potentially disagree. Or maybe over time, you know, have started to disagree on certain things, that those can be really challenging.
Definitely. And as we've talked about many, many times, the difficulty for us moms to ask for help. I think that is also a really tricky conversation to bring up with our spouses, and not because it won't be received well, but because of the guilt that we feel about it. So, you know, we talked a little bit earlier about the effects and the benefits of, you know, our children being able to see us communicate effectively, and also the importance of repairing conflict. So just to kind of, you know, touch on that a little bit more, you know, modeling that emotional regulation for us to be able to recognize that how we're carrying ourselves is really, really important, because our children, even though we're not saying, you know, hey, don't do this or do it this way, but then we're doing it differently. First of all, mixed messages. But second of all, that saying, do as I say, not as I do, is complete BS. Because we are spongy beings, and we will absorb, whether we want to or not. We do absorb our environment. So it's really important for us to make sure that we're modeling that emotional regulation, that we're modeling healthy communication, and also, you know, just again, understanding the difference between like rupturing a relationship as a whole, or rupturing a specific interaction. You know, it kind of breaks down the connection that you have with someone else because you're not doing the repair. So just some important things to know.
I also, and this is just through like observation and experience with clients and whatnot, that I think that there is this period, and we kind of talked about it at the beginning, where, you know, a lot of times people think like, oh, this is a rupture, you know, right? Like it's, and it can be repaired. And then there's other times where it is a rupture and people just keep going because they think it'll benefit the kids, right? And so there's so many aspects to this that I just want to point out. And then obviously there's like true rupture, and like things need to end, you know, in some way. And so I kind of think that there are those like three kind of categories that end up happening, where we think that there's a rupture, and then what comes after that. Obviously we want everybody to be able to repair that relationship, but also knowing that if you can't, like, it's okay. And also, if you really have gotten to the point where you can't repair it, don't just keep coasting, because your kids will see it. Your kids will be able to feel it. They'll know it. They'll model it, right? And so, and they know. They'll be able to know that there is a rupture that isn't able to be repaired. So I just wanted to kind of put that like in there as well, that you know, there has to be a lot of awareness of kind of where you're at between rupture and repair.
And I do want to point out, you know, where you say like they'll know. I think it's important to acknowledge that piece. And when we say they'll know, we're not necessarily saying that they will be able to fully comprehend what's happening and interpret it correctly and accurately. What we mean is that they will absorb that, they will internalize that, and they may not have any recognition that they are absorbing that, but it will be absorbed and it will come out at some point.
In their emotions, in their behaviors, in their interactions.
Even 100%. In their, like, their beliefs, like as they grow up, they're going to end up having this understanding or this belief that, like, oh, well, this is just the way that I think about this particular topic X. And it's like, well, why? Where does that come from? And a lot of times you're like, I don't know. That's just what I believe. That's where this comes from.
Yeah. Oh, such a good point. I'm glad that you kind of went a little, like, a step forward, a step deeper with that, because yes, 100%, that they might, I mean, even as teenagers are not necessarily able to articulate what that is, but it'll be felt, it'll be seen, and it'll start to percolate their own belief systems about connection, relationships, communication, right, wrong, should, shouldn'ts, right? Like all of that stuff starts to then mold your kids, right? Definitely. So then when they're adults, and kind of going back to, like, never seeing our parents argue, right? Like that,
like, you don't know what that means as a kid.
No.
You may not have any, like, awareness of it, but guess what? When you become an adult, you see how that actually manifests.
Yeah, and impacts, for sure.
Yeah.
Yep. And then having to almost dig deeper to be like, wait a minute, why do I believe this? Or why do I look at relationships this way? Or why do I overcompensate and try to say, oh, wait, because maybe my parents didn't do that, right? Yeah. So then you start to really uncover those things. And so if we're more intentional and if we're more aware of that in the moment, like, obviously our kids are still going to take belief systems, but it's going to be a lot different than thinking that we just have to deal with the fact that, like, oh, wait a minute, like, I don't know how to actually do this,
And that's exactly why I said earlier that there's always a deeper meaning to things, because there always is. Like, we, as humans, we're just very complex beings, and this is a perfect example of that.
So we want to kind of challenge all of you mamas to do a couple things. Choose one conversation that you have been avoiding, whether that's with your partner, or maybe that is with an extended family member. Maybe that's with a friend. Maybe it's with your kids, right? Obviously, like I said, this episode was really talking more about your partner, but choose one conversation that you've been avoiding. Write it out first instead of just reacting to it, like in the moment. And then pay attention to your triggers and your body signals when it comes to, like, that one conversation. And then taking everything that we've shared with you to then be able to approach any of those people with discussing that. I think those three are really, I challenge you all to maybe do that this week or the coming weeks, especially because, like, we're in the holiday season when we're recording this, and, like, this is like hard. This is time to have hard conversations, like, in the sense of, like, conversations are hard because we have so much going on. But I almost encourage you to have those hard conversations when they are hard.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think, and again, there's a lot here. We talked about a lot today. So, if you feel like you have to come back and rewatch the episode to really kind of, I don't know, maybe catch something that you didn't hear the first time around, take some notes and come back to some of the tools that we talked about today. But if, anything resonated in this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with another mom who needs to hear this. New episodes of The Rooted Lounge drop every other Friday for the next couple of months. And you can find us on Instagram at beyond.being.mamas. And thanks so much for being in the lounge with us, and we'll see you next time.